Hello, Leigh. How are we this morning?
Hey. It's the coldest day. I feel like I'm in the day after tomorrow.
I'm ready to raid a library and burn some non-fiction.
I realize this is an audio medium, but just know that me and Fi also kind of look like we could be in that library.
We both got onto this video call smothered in blankets, I think would be a phrase that would aptly describe it. I also have a cold, so my register is even lower than it normally is. You're welcome. Here's to me and Nancy and our androgynous voices.
But ironically, Fiona, do you know what's heating up?
Oh, please do tell me.
Season 2 of The West Wing.
You wouldn't be wrong. You honestly wouldn't be wrong. Only a few episodes out from the finale.
From the finale. I don't know, like that was like Idiem Menzel.
Adele Dazeem.
Adele Dazeem. Fabulous. I think we should get right into Season 2, Episode 20, The Fall's Gonna Kill You, on Queer Gals Watch The West Wing.
Yeah, welcome back, listeners, to Queer Gals Watch The West Wing with myself, Fi, and my bestest gal pal, Leigh. I think we're just going to go all in, straight into the recap, because juicy ep, to say the least.
Juicy. I was stressed.
I think the anxiety levels from here on out, Leigh, until the end of this season, maybe even carrying on into season 3, I'm not sure that like my cortisol levels can take this.
I do feel like Aaron, by shooting Josh at the end of the first season, he really didn't give himself a huge amount of space to like build up with each season finale. I'm like, what crazy shit.
Yeah, like where do we go from a mass shooting? Like where do we go from...
Famously, the lesson learned by Grey's Anatomy.
And as Shonda has done for many years, things have just got crazier in that hospital. Things have just escalated. Okay, so what I'm going to say is The Fall's Gonna Kill You, not giving me a great feeling as an episode title.
No, I'm feeling Fall of Caesar vibes, not unlike one particularly tense drama society leadership election that we were both witness to in circa 2014.
We can't go there, but
we can't go there. The lore is too deep, and it's to do with people whom me and Fi have no contact with. But just know that if you had been at the University of York leadership elections for the Drama Society in circa 2014, just know that craziness went down.
Yeah, it was wild. It was a scene from Roman history, truly. Nations rising and falling. It was unbelievable.
And I'm just hoping that Jed is not about to be subject to the kind of like Shakespearean fall from grace that we witnessed that night.
Truly. What we get from our previously on is that we're heavily focusing once again on Jed's MS, diagnosis concealment.
Yes.
But does this mean, Leigh, we get more time with Oliver Babbish? I hope so. This is immediately given to us on a platter in our cold open, which is that we're opening in the office of the White House Counsel at 5:30 a.m., Leigh.
Which is an insane time to be at work. It's not even a time that I like to see on the clock for any reason.
Agreed, unless I'm getting a flight.
Then,
I don't want to be conscious.
Even then, I don't want to be aware of 5:30 a.m. as a time.
What I will say is we're in the room with CJ fucking Cregg.
We are so glad that she's back in a big way, because I feel she's been sidelined for a few eps now.
Yeah. And boy, is she back, because if we can talk for a moment about a matching of intellectual equals here. Wow. What a scene.
I am simply thrilled by the meeting of minds between Oliver and Claudia here. But I was distressed that we didn't get to see the moment of Claudia Jean finding out the goss with Jed.
And we also find out there's kind of Oliver goes through a sort of timeline of other people finding out how long people have known. And we find out that Josh has now been told. And it does seem, I mean, obviously they're just strapped for time, but like it does seem a shame that we didn't get to see. I would have been really interested to have seen CJ's and Josh's reactions.
Yes, and I do get that it's kind of more elegant writing to do it this way. But at the same time, I think just like on a greedy level, I want to see that character moment.
Yeah, true. I kind of felt like it was a bit harsh that, so she's come in for this meeting at 5:30. She was told at midnight the night before. We also found out that Josh knew for 2 days longer than she did. That the concept of some people knowing for longer than others is becoming more and more stressful as time goes on, because the web of secrets, and I think this is why Toby Ziegler is on the edge in this episode.
Oh, he is a man on the edge.
He just needs everyone to know. He just needs the information to be out. Because the bitch can't hold on to a secret, and it's killing him.
Yeah, and I do get that. I feel like as communications director as well, we know that he's going to be doing a lot of mopping up. He's going to be the one really having to come in and clean up house. And so I totally get being like, I'm an excellent man in a crisis. I need the crisis to just happen now. I can't like anticipate it anymore.
Yeah, 100%. I think that the dialogue in this scene is written so pithily. Like, you can feel CJ's fatigue. You can feel that she hasn't actually had time to like really ruminate on this yet.
It's not processed.
It's not processed. And the writing of Oliver Babbish is so good because he's just cross-examining her immediately. Because I can see, you can see him in his head being like, you're tired and you're stressed. This is a really good moment for me to push you and see how strong you are, because when we get into that grand jury, you're going to feel exactly the same.
That is so true. And I think what's also interesting here is obviously we are used to seeing a CJ who is obviously prepping her White House press briefings with her team. You know, she's being supported by her team to make those White House press briefings. And therefore, there's a kind of back and forth. There's an exchange that leads her to say, this is how I'm going to spin it. And in this moment, she has to do this processing in isolation because her team is physically not allowed to know.
Yeah, there's no moment to talk this through with Carol. There's no moment to delegate. And that must be really hard. It's like you're taking on all that workload yourself. Shall we divulge in just a moment of kind of Oliver, Claudia back and forth? And I'm wondering, Leigh, who you would like to play this week?
I would like to be Claudia Jean, please.
Excellent. I will be Oliver.
I've had this for 6 hours now, so maybe giving me some room wouldn't be totally out of line. You know what I'm saying, Oliver?
CJ, I've got to ask you some questions. The less you can be pissed at the world for no particular reason, the better, I think.
I don't know you.
I'm sorry?
I don't know you. I've been told to report to you. You've been here, what?
3 months.
3 months, so why should I trust you?
Well, I don't care if you trust me or not.
Imagine my shock.
I've got better things to do with my imagination.
I think this is going really well so far, Oliver. It's almost hard to believe that 4 different women have sued you for divorce.
Wow. I kind of want them to date.
It is kind of hot. You know what? I never expected myself to kind of experience sexual allure for Oliver Babbish, and yet I do find that is what is happening.
Unfortunately, this is why the Josh Lyman of it all happens as well, Leigh. It's because when a guy is kind of like shitty, but in a really intelligent way, I find it incredibly attractive.
He has gumption.
Indeed, he has gumption.
Much like a kind of 1950s Spitfire, like a Katharine Hepburn. But some fascinating things at play here. Number one, I believe this to be the most emotional and Josh-like we've ever seen CJ be allowed to be, but in a really good way. And number two, is this the first time that we've ever seen CJ, A, not respect the person that she's talking to, and B, not be so focused on working an angle or a spin that she's not able to take her own feelings out of it.
Yeah, I think it does feel like it's the first time we've seen with CJ her not prepped. Because she is the queen of prep. Like, she is never going into any sort of interaction, any press briefing without those notes. And I think that because the facts of the matter are much more emotional to her, like finding out about President Bartlet's illness, I think instead of going home and being like, right, what the fuck's the play here? I feel like she went home and was just like I can't even think about this.
I think she went home and sat awake in her clothes for 4 hours and then was like, right, better shower and just put too much faith in the power of a new shirt.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say the flash of knee as she sits down in the black skirt with the touch of anger was simply a wow for me. Also, dare I say, Oliver making his debut as our man. I feel like a man with, so why don't you knock off the cutie pie crap and answer the damn question?
Yeah, this was a real big moment for me as well. I really, there is no right for him to pull off that line.
No.
At all.
But I will say, this cold open, I am so in. We are cooking with gasoline. The engine is roaring and we are only reaching the credits and it's already so ominous.
It's a heavy vibe. But Leigh, let's revel in the fact that as we come out of the opening credits, we've got a Stockard Channing and a Marlee Matlin guest star confirmed.
Is that 3 featured women in one episode?
I think you'll find that it is. It's actually a very, female-led story heavy week. That's a crazy sentence. But do you know what I mean?
Yes.
We're getting a lot more screen time and we're having women lead storylines, which we don't actually get that often.
No, it does feel like a female gaze moment.
And not to, pun absolutely intended, coming crashing back down to earth with Donna here, because Donna's being given a classic nuts Donna situation this week. And her fun story is NASA have sent a fax, moment of nostalgia please, to say that a Chinese satellite is going to crash to Earth, but they don't know where or when. I note here that I'm sure we will come back to this. I am correct.
Yes. And I note here that Donna is wearing a very, very hot light grey suit, which really sets off her alabaster skin. And I also love seeing her in the moment prior to being taken in by the NASA fax. We get to see her being extremely capable and amazing at her job, seamlessly gatekeeping Josh's time, but with reference to Josh being late for a meeting because he's in with Leo. And I desperately need to know what is happening in the room where it happens.
Yeah. You picked up on a line from this scene, which I also really enjoyed.
I'm an assistant. What am I supposed to do with this information? Which I felt deeply to my core.
I think it's a very relevant thing that she's saying. She's handed this fax and they're like, oh, could you give this to CJ? Donald's not even part of CJ's staff. Chaos. Anyway, meanwhile, our core boys, what is happening in the room where it happens is that our core boys are having a war council. So Toby's putting forward a concept that they should do some polling. And then they were talking for a while, but I didn't concentrate and I stopped listening because I think Margaret's come into the room with an amazing new bob.
Yes.
But for a matter of seconds.
Yes, I will say it does feel as though Margaret's bob is kind of getting cuntier by the hour in the best way possible.
It's a sharp, what would you call it? It's a geometric bob.
Edna moding for sure.
She looks stunning. Anyway, the plan is that we're going to get Joey Lucas to do this polling. And Wiley, because Josh trusts Joey Lucas. Yeah, I trust Joey Lucas. So Josh has lured Joey Lucas here on false pretenses because he's asking her to do a poll about agriculture, specifically beets, which I think he believes to be a funny joke. I don't think it's funny. It's lame. But I do wonder if we will see any sort of reference to what she said to him when they were last together.
What I will say is Josh just got even hotter in my estimation because he has actually, for a moment, put aside his own personal feelings about a female professional in Joey Lucas because he believes her to be capable and good at her job and he respects her.
Oh, don't we just love it when men do the bare minimum? The other tidbit we get here is that Sam Seaborn is now the only member of our gang who doesn't know about Jed's diagnosis.
Again.
I know. Toby has said that Sam's got this big writing deadline and doesn't want to distract him, which I do understand from a managerial position, but part of me is like, if there's bad news, just tell me the bad news. It's like parents being like, oh, we didn't want to bother you with this. Always just bother me with it.
Yeah.
Just tell me. And then I know, and then I can respond however I wish.
Radio silence speaks volumes and it equals anxiety.
Yeah. And when I realized that Sam didn't know, I was like, oh, wait, if these are the only people that know, then Dolores Landingham doesn't know.
craziness.
Right? That kind of passed me by because I was like, oh, Charlie knows. But that's also crazy for Charlie that Charlie's been sitting on that, sharing an office with Dolores, who's, as we well know, has known Jed for years.
And he's also very concerned about his health.
Yeah, famously trying to make him not eat red meat. Toby, unsurprisingly, is highly strung. Him just muttering, I don't trust anyone right now, is proving to me that for all of his sort of political activist chat that we had a few episodes ago, he actually just hates secrets and conflict.
Yeah. Again, reinforcing the kind of stage manager role.
Yeah. Donna and Josh finally kind of like rejoin and head off to this other meeting that Donna's been postponing whilst Josh has been in his war council. And obviously this gives Donna an opportunity to splurge out all of her satellite-based anxiety. This is also for me why faxes are stressful, because only one prints. So you send a fax and it prints out. So if someone tears that fax off and is like, oh, I'll give it to someone. Like now there's no, you know, like with an email, there's a thread, there's a chain, there's something that lives in the internet. I don't know how emails work, but you know what I mean? Like we can come back to it. We can refer back. Once the fax is lost, the fax is lost. So I started getting stressed about the fax. Turns out I shouldn't have even bothered thinking about the fax. It's a nonsense storyline. But who is Martin, Leigh? And why is Martin waiting? Turns out Martin, new character alert, Martin is a lawyer. And a fun storyline because Josh is taking on Big Tobacco. It's giving Erin Brockovich.
It's just a perfect kind of knight on white horse storyline for Josh, isn't it?
Yeah, him just being like, gotta keep these kids from smoking. I like Martin. Martin is very stressed. I feel for him. As he walks out from this meeting with Josh, he says, they perpetrated a fraud against the public.
He's a man of the people, you know? He's overworked and he's underpaid. He gets us, he sees us.
He essentially is waging this battle against Big Tobacco, and he lays out to Josh the amount of money that the government is spending on this case, and then says how much Big Tobacco is spending, which is obviously like 10 times as much, with like double the amount of staff or more. What I enjoyed was seeing Josh's stomach really drop at the line, they perpetrated a fraud against the public. And some cogs do be getting a whirring in little Joshy's brain, I think.
Yeah, you can kind of hear the Twilight Zone music, like...
But back to Babbish and CJ. In the cold open, CJ was asked how many times she'd lied about the president's health. And she said, lots of times. Turns out, very true. So many press conferences about Jed's health, like post-physical, post the shooting, obviously famously post riding into the tree on his bike.
But the question is, did she know she was lying?
Well, this is the thing. And this is what I found really interesting. It makes me feel like there's so much more at stake for CJ publicly than for the others, if you know what I mean. Like she's a spokesperson, like that TV footage is out there of her being like, the president's in good health. So like from a public image perspective, she is tied up in this lie so much more than say Toby, Sam or Josh, who would have been having these conversations perhaps with other legislators or politicians, but not perhaps on camera to the press. So I kind of feel quite deeply in my core the anger and anxiety and frustration that CJ's feeling, because she's like, I was committing perjury over and over and over and over again.
I mean, I think it's not technically perjury because she's not in a court of law.
But you know what I mean? It's like she's lying whilst not knowing she's lying.
Yeah, it's her face that will have been on people's TVs.
But we'll have some more on that later, because we must away to Sam Seaborn's storyline this week. And we classically cut to a room where Sam is monologuing and everyone else is silently writing.
Bless the blissfully ignorant Sam Seaborn. God love him, he's having such a good day. And it's really going to be trampled all over in quite a big way.
Yeah. So he's working on what's just referred to as the Chicago speech currently. This is like his little project that he's leading. He's doing his thing where he's sort of monologuing aloud and expecting people to kind of be taking down what he's saying.
Just
which
for
I really
the joy
love.
of rhetoric,
you
know?
He just loves public speaking, whether other people want to hear it or not.
I'm a spokesman. It's in my blood.
It's what I do. So Sam gets some news that, and this is what I think is happening, Leigh, and you may have to help me out here. So he's getting some news that essentially the country's economic growth is going to be lower than expecting. So the surplus is going to be smaller this year, which is good because that means that there's going to be less arguing about where to spend public money. And that's why everyone's happy?
In all honesty, Fi, the surplus I've never fully been able to get my head around. And I think it best that we move on swiftly before I get myself into kind of tangled knots involving economics and maths that I don't understand.
Let's just leave that to Jed Bartlet and his Nobel Prize in economics.
Yeah.
I think it's so stupid he has a Nobel Prize. That's crazy. He gets this information that essentially, however, we're not sure. I don't know anything, okay? There's going to be less money and everyone's happy about that because there's going to be less arguing is kind of what it boiled down to. But the people who have brought this information are coming from a certain caucus, and that caucus wants there to be a line about tax cuts in the Chicago speech. And Sam has said no, and this is going to be important in some way. And I'm going to move on because it's not as interesting to me as I think so.
What I will say is, crucially, the caucus in question is the Progressive Caucus, which we're going to be looking at a little bit later.
Okay. And they're like hardcore Democrats.
One of the founding members of the Progressive Caucus in real life was Bernie Sanders. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. That's all the information I needed. Once more, we're going to go back to Babbish and CJ. And I must say that these two dueling has been some of the best writing in the season so far, I think.
In fact, I would say it's been the honour of my life to watch.
Couldn't have put it better myself, Leigh. CJ just giving her best levels of sass and Oliver responding, CJ, in my entire life, I've never found anything charming.
Wow.
What a way to respond to someone who's like trying to like act all cool and like, I'm going to use that.
I also know that Oliver Babbish is exactly the kind of deadpan man that, like, were I to be around, I would become like kind of tumbling ball of energy, attempting to be some kind of court jester.
Yeah, you'd become incredibly shrill. And I mean that with love. It's just the truth. I noted down this little interaction because I just thought it was very cool and like very like suave and lawyery. Should we reprise our previous roles, Leigh? Do you know what time it is?
It's noon.
I'd like you to get out of the habit of doing that.
Doing what?
Answering more than was asked. Do you know what time it is?
Yes.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. I mean, it's so stressful, but it's so good. To the canteen. The mess just getting so much airtime. I'm really glad they invested in the new set this season because it's really come into its own. It is a gift, Leigh. A gift to have a journalist refer to Toby and Sam as the Batman and Robin of speechwriting.
I will say there are more references to Batman in this show than me personally would have expected. But also a question to the room, is Batman the most respected of the superheroes by real life grown men? And if so, why? Why do they love him specifically so much?
Do you know why I think they love him so much? It's because he doesn't have powers. He's just an ordinary man, Leigh. He's just a billionaire.
He's just a man with an origin story.
Truly. And I think the thing is they're like, look, I could never be Superman. You know, I'm not going to get bitten by a radioactive spider. But what I could do is be a billionaire and fight crime. Also, I think men are drawn to Batman because he's just like so like angry and twisted and dark.
Yeah.
He's so tortured. And I mean, it says a lot about modern masculinity that that's something that's very attractive, predominantly to heterosexual white men. But that's a different podcast. We won't get into it. But what we will do, Leigh, is do this sparky back and forth between Toby Ziegler and Sam Seaborn. Would you like to be Toby or Sam?
Let me be Toby today. We're Batman and Robin.
Which one's which?
Look at me, Sam. My Robin.
I'm not Robin.
Yes, you are.
Okay, well, let's move off this.
You bet, little friend.
Listen, we're not really Batman and Robin.
No, we'll keep those identities secret. I'm Bruce Wayne and you're my ward. I just also I can't help but feel that like Toby's just trying to be nice to Sam today because he knows that he's like this little happy lamb that's going to be put up for slaughter at the end of the day.
So stressful. I think for me, Toby's like, I'm going to take any little bit of positivity I can possibly get because life is so stressful and what little of my hair is left is rapidly leaving my scalp. I am kind of obsessed with the concept that Toby thinks of Sam not as a friend, not really even as a colleague, but like kind of a ward-like character.
A surrogate son.
Yeah, but not a son. Not in a fatherly way, but more as like a legal guardian.
He thinks of him as Pip from Great Expectations.
Yeah. Just
a kind of sickly Victorian child that
just
he's
getting into
been
scrapes.
tasked with taking care of. I will say this began the part of the episode where I just became so deeply stressed that Sam was going to somehow find out inadvertently, and it was going to be even more hurtful that he'd not had like his proper moment of being told.
Yeah. It's all very stressful. I will say that I must have a moment for a line from Toby Ziegler, which was just, I'm so happy I could spit.
Another cracking candidate for Man I Feel Like a Man, because I don't know that any female or gender non-conforming person has ever felt so happy they could spit.
Yeah, I would go so far to say it would be something that if I could outlaw a thing, ban it forever and actually, enforce that, it would be spitting. I think it's the worst thing in the entire world and men do it all the time and I think it's disgusting. Anyway, classically, Donna Moss has done some research, Leigh, and she's freaking out about the satellite. She is doing this freak out in front of Charlie, at Charlie, but not really involving Charlie in the dialogue.
I will say, what does Charlie have against the Swiss?
There is a point where he kind of comes for the Swiss in this, and there's some beef there, and I imagine there was some sort of trip.
Yes.
And like maybe his counterpart in Switzerland.
I would love a like
little bit of
bitchy
beef?
rivalry, like foreign counterpart moment for Charlie. Yeah. I would love that as a storyline.
Yeah.
Oh, please give me the Swiss Charlie that Charlie hates.
Yeah. So that was my instinct there. I just was really glad that Charlie was having absolutely none of it and was like just egging Donna on in such a glorious way that I really needed. It's like the light relief I needed in this episode. Also, for me, this whole scenario with the satellite is absolute confirmation that Donna in the modern day would get drawn into the power of like Facebook conspiracies, Reddit threads, like big YouTube videos. Like I would worry she would fall for clickbait left, right and center.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. 100%.
May I lead to Abbey Bartlet?
Wow. Entrance.
I'm sorry. But Abbey Bartlet coming back to the White House, her entrance is like she's fucking Elizabeth Taylor.
It is. It's giving Diana showing up at that party in the revenge dress.
It's very Elizabeth Taylor marrying a man, getting given millions of dollars worth of jewels and then divorcing him. It's just so fucking glam. It's so cunty. Look. She's been away. Her and Jed are fighting. She comes back. She walks into the White House. She comes to the Oval Office. Jed's like, oh, like, honey, it's so good to see you. No kiss for Jed. No, what I saw, Leigh, and I don't know if you saw it too, is I saw like a moment where like Jed like leans in, like goes forward as if to, and she just breezes on past. The Ice Queen. Will she ever thaw?
But what I do also love is like at no point do I feel their marriage is in jeopardy. What I'm getting is Abbey Bartlet is so secure in the fact that Jed Bartlet is obsessed with her and has been for 35 years. She knows she can be as cunty as she wants to him and hold him to the doghouse for as long as she wants. And she knows that he will be ready, waiting and wagging his tail to be let back inside the main house.
Honestly, for me, it's all games. And deep down underneath because I think they both love the drama. They're very dramatic people, famously very dramatic people. I think that simmering under all of this, because they are genuinely stressed, but underneath the genuine stress is at some point, we're going to fuck.
And it's going to be amazing.
Yep.
I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I think Jed goes down. He has that energy.
Do you know what? I don't think he did when he first met Abbey, but Abbey was like, look.
If you want to marry me, this is a stipulation.
Yeah.
It's not just going to be all about you.
100%. And I think him getting reciprocation is for high days and holidays only. But she's like, every time. Yeah. The expectation is you're going down.
Yeah.
Love that for them. That's a power play. And I think he's into it. Anyway, let's get back to the TV show, The West Wing, and things that actually happen in it. So the reason why she's come in all fire and brimstone is because she had a phone call with Leo when she was on the plane heading home, where he was talking about the fact that they found this medical history letter from Zoe's college application, which Abbey signed, not disclosing Jed's MS, the smoking gun, if you will.
Thus, Abby's name is actually the one that's truly on the line in terms of the potential criminal conspiracy to fraud the people of the United States.
Yeah, big deal. And what Leo didn't know is that up until that point, Jed had not mentioned any of this to his wife.
Because he is afraid of her.
Which is important, and we do love. But also, Jed, please, come on. You're a grown man. You're not a grown man. You're an aging man.
Yeah. Also, your medical care is in this woman's hands.
Yeah. Which this whole scenario leads to these two lines, Leigh, which are absolutely crazy. Would you like to be Jed or Abbey?
I will be Jed.
Did you sign it?
No, you did, Hot Pants. Now,
Hot Pants.
Hot Pants is crazy.
Yeah.
This is a very somber moment, but I would like a bit of conjecture.
Sure.
On the lore of Flotus and the Hot Pants. What I'm seeing in my mind's eye is roller derby.
So far from where I thought you were going to go. Abbey was into roller derby. I mean, she's scrappy, but like... I think roller derby's hot, personally.
I think potentially post-first baby, Abbey was like, I need to feel myself again post-first pregnancy. And the workout regime I have chosen is roller derby with the girls. And God damn it, I'm going to get in the hot pants.
I love that from you. I love how that's where you went. And me, I was like, is this like a weird Jedism where he's like, you're like hot, like angry hot, but like it's an Americanism to be like, you got hot pants. I don't know.
To my knowledge, that is not an expression. I think he means literally hot pants, as in very teeny tiny shorts.
Okay. Well, either way, the whole scenario is absolutely bonkers. What I also think is bonkers in this scene is because Jed kind of getting the silent treatment from Abbey, he just starts saying things he's upset about. One of which is just the sentence, I hate Ellie's boyfriend.
I love when men just get so upset that all they can do is just like mumble and grumble about anything that comes to mind.
Yeah. He's like, Zoe's going to ace her finals, I think. I hate Ellie's boyfriend. I'm like, please, Jed, give Ellie a break. Not everyone can find a Charlie, you know? Like some of us made choices when we were at college, you know?
I'm sure Ellie's boyfriend is infinitely superior to many of the people whom we dated at age 20.
Oh no, I bet he's trash. In my head, because Leigh, you've written in the shared doc, breaking my heart that she's not gay on top of everything else. I think Eleanor is a queer woman. And I think she's just finding her way there, as we all did, you know? So I think she's dating she's dating the guy. We all know the guy, right? That you're like,
the origin story. The guy that becomes the lesbian origin story. Yeah.
Truly. Yeah. Your Republican boyfriend.
Oh no, let's not put that on him. He was lovely. It was the English lads that came after. Politics aside, and he's not a Republican anymore. He was gorgeous. No, let's not put that on him. I would say my lesbian origin story was much more so the kind of heinous, disgusting English lads of uni.
Well, yeah, they're awful. Yeah.
As a collective.
I mean, nothing will make you hate men more than British lads between the age of, say, 18 and 26. Truly heinous. You know, as any kind of self-respecting bisexual woman, I do hate most men. And those I would say are sort of my core group. Leigh, you've put Give Me Babbish and Stockard now.
I'm ready for this.
And it's coming, baby. It's coming. But we must go back to Sam Seaborn. I've said in this bit, I'm wondering if his friendship with Ainsley is kind of rubbing off on Sam. Now, this scene for me was very confusing because I don't understand a lot of what's happening. So I put fun scene with the caucus, at a caucus. I'm still unclear because it seems like people say we've got a caucus, like it's a meeting, but then they're also from a caucus, like a collection of people. Are both things true?
Both things can be true. But I think,
for God's sake.
I think as a caucus, they have taken a meeting.
Do you see how grammatically it's confusing to me?
It's the fact that it's both a kind of noun, verb, and object is confusing. But so as a caucus, they have taken a meeting with Sam. However, to caucus is to meet with your other caucus members. Okay,
yeah. Okay. You know what? I'm just going to give this one to the Americans and be like, there's a reason why we don't have it in the UK. And that's it. Just that this is a bridge too far for us. So it seems like in this meeting, Sam is basically saying, I'm not going to put this like basically kind of like diss track moment in this speech because it's really shit. And he's saying, I don't really want to make fun of the rich because they're already paying the highest tax and we're probably going to make that tax higher. So like, let's just let them get on with it and not kick them while we're also taking a bunch of their money, which we don't feel bad about. I kind of feel like that's a sound argument. Like, your tax is going to be really high. Yeah. I'm going to take loads of your income. So I'm not also going to make you feel like shit.
I will say this is kind of like a 1990s, early 2000s view in that I think the Progressive Caucus at this time was not taken particularly seriously because it didn't have the same kind of heft behind it that it does now. But we will get to that in our study session.
Thrilled.
But I do love Sam being like, let's leave the diss tracks to Kendrick Lamar. What a halftime show that was.
What a halftime show that was. Just when Serena turned up, I was like,
oh... Writing a diss track and then getting the ex-girlfriend of the person who the diss track is about. I mean, that is levels of petty that I can only aspire to, and I love it.
It's gorgeous.
Fully support it.
What I will say about Sam in this scene is that he does a classic thing, which is he gets kind of stressed and then makes a statement and then kind of scurries around that statement in a way that he's uncomfortable. So this is him describing why he doesn't like the writing. Leigh, may I be Sam Seaborn? It's bad writing.
What's wrong with it?
Well, it sounds like it was written by a high school girl.
Is there something wrong with the way a woman writes?
There usually is when she's in high school.
We've got a caucus.
Literally cutting him off. The stunning thing is that he then gets very stressed. Helen, who he's been sparring with about this, he needs Helen to know that he's a feminist. And so as Helen leaves, he like pulls her back and he's like, I know plenty of women who can write, Helen. I know women who can blow the walls off of brick buildings. This sounds like a girl. Okay,
Aaron, you really haven't had like the feminist moment that you thought that you've had with this.
But I think that's the point he's making. It's just
a moment of justice for teenage girls, please. Why is it specifically girls?
Look, if you go back to the depths of Tumblr, some of us were putting out some pretty good shit when we were that age, all right? Some of us were writing some heavy poetry, some sort of fanfic from time to time. There were narratives being weaved there. And I resent the fact that is being discussed as bad writing by the Deputy Communications manager for the president of the United States.
And I just feel that like in a post-Malala and post-Greta Thunberg world, we would not be having the same discourse around girls riding.
Do you want to know a really fun fact about this kind of whole storyline that Sam's got?
Yes, I do.
So this trivia came through our lovely friend of the pod, Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So the people that Sam meets with in this section are, as you've said before, the Progressive Caucus. And this part of the episode came through Lawrence O'Donnell, who was approached by Oakland Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who was a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. And they were trying to get this idea of giving a $300 tax credit to working class people, but it wasn't getting any traction at the time. And so she was like, if you could shine a light on this proposal through mentioning it in the West Wing, maybe it's going to come into discourse enough for us to like start getting some movement on it.
I will also say Barbara Lee served in Congress up until 2025.
Cheers to you, gal. Thanks, Barbara.
Literally obsessed with her. We're actually going to bring her up later also.
Amazing. Shall we pick Joey Lucas up at the airport, Leigh?
Oh my God. Yes.
So,
yes.
This is an incredibly stressful scene.
But also one of the greatest scenes of television I've ever watched.
Yeah. We meet Joey at the airport. Also, I would love for Josh to not call out Joey's name loudly in public to get her attention. I feel like we should have learnt more than this from an like access perspective.
Not approach her, a gentle touch to the elbow?
Yeah. That kind of was crazy for me, but whatever. Kenny's on holiday. So we have a character who's called Dale Brackett, which is a very funny name. And after the kind of shouting to get her attention, which I hated, we actually have what I think is a really gorgeous scene where actually Josh, in my opinion, is the most respectful and honest I've ever seen him with Joey.
Absolutely agree. I am mildly concerned that Kenny has gone to Mandyland. I really don't want this to be the end of Kenny's tenure.
Yeah, I'm with respect to Dale, he is no Kenny and I need Kenny.
But it is also a gorgeous raise of the stakes to Josh, who's already handling a very sensitive moment to say, oh, and there's going to be this unexpected element. You're going to be wrong-footed because there's a new person in the mix you're not expecting to be there.
Yeah. But buckle up, Leigh. And buckle up, Babbish, because Abbey Bartlet is on her way. Let's have a moment for the line of dialogue from Stockard Channing. The president is very glad you're here, particularly in this time of nonsense. I mean, to refer to what's happening as nonsense, I believe is crazy.
There is also then immediately an arsenic and old lace reference.
It's so crazy.
Which together really gives Abbey Bartlet a kind of drag queen energy through this scene.
Yes. And the thing I love about this scene, and once again, it's me just, doffing my hat to the writers team once more, is Abbey is so intelligent. She's a fiercely intelligent character. But what's phenomenal is it's written as a totally different type of intelligence to like CJ and Toby and Jed. You can see the law school influence in those people in the way that you don't. And Abbey ties herself in knots and like falls foul of kind of Babbish's language and questioning, not because she's not as intelligent as him, but because her intelligence is founded in a different system.
She's a scientist. She's a doctor. Yeah.
Yeah. And that for me was phenomenal because he really takes her down in this scene.
Abbey is really getting beaten up at the moment in like a really big way. But as you note, Abby's resume is ridiculous. Where she found the time to have 3 babies, I really don't know.
Yeah. And also a husband who was a governor.
Yeah.
Insane. She is legit an incredible doctor. And this is why this is becoming more and more stressful, which we get back to later on in the episode. I thought it was very juicy when she was like, look, I think you're whipping this all up because it's going to look really good for you to be the person who's like the president's lawyer at a time like this. I think this is all about self-promotion. And him being like, I think my resume looks pretty good already. Love that from him. And then he does some more kind of cross-examination of her and she keeps coming back to this like, well, I don't remember. And like, well, I don't think Jed would remember. And I'm with Babbish when he's like, look, we're announcing that the president has a degenerative condition. What we can't have is him at any point saying, I don't remember to any questions.
Yeah.
As Babbish says, Mrs. Bartlett, I don't think you have an appropriate appreciation of the size of this thing that happens next.
Yeah.
Stunning. Back to the airport. Leigh, I've never had more faith in a woman with a job than in Joey Lucas right now.
I could not agree more. Yeah.
Also, you mentioned this in the shared doc. So Josh has taken Joey off on her own, so she's not got Dale with her. And they're sat across a table from each other. And he's like, something's wrong with the president. And Joey asks what it is. And then it's the only time that Josh uses any ASL. And he just signs M and S, which is really beautiful. And then Marlee Matlin's performance from that is so moving. And her asking like how the president was, like, is he okay?
Which is the first time that we've heard someone actually ask, like, inquire about how he is.
Yeah, I found her performance really beautiful. Obviously, my gut worry is if she steps in now and is part of the team that's saving the president, will Josh fall fully in love with her? And what sort of situation does that spell for Donna?
Yes, I will say, why am I in love with Joey Lucas? The way she asks Josh, how is the president? And like the little chin cup that she does so that she can lip read him.
Yeah.
These are the details that you get from casting an actor who is authentic to the experience of the character they're playing.
Yeah.
And then the symbolism of Josh putting the napkin where they've been writing things back and forth that are too difficult to lip read or sign for Josh. The symbolism of putting that napkin just in his glass of water and like swilling it around.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing for me is like putting the napkin in the water and like destroying it made me, it's continually reinforcing the whole way through this episode. We have continual reinforcement of like how high the stakes are and the level of secrecy we're talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of Donna, she's still monologuing at Charlie about this satellite. And I mentioned this earlier, and I just wanted to kind of note it again. The way that Charlie is egging her on and messing with her is so enjoyable. And I would like to say that it's similar to the way that one might kind of wind up one's mother when they're rough on one. And I can do nothing but endorse it. There are so many women firing on all cylinders in this ep.
Yes, and the moment I have been crying out for since the moment of Abbey trying to set CJ up with that doctor, the gals are back together. Abbey and CJ in one room. I will say I was very stressed about how soundproof or not each of these rooms was throughout this episode.
Everywhere we're having conversations, I'm so stressed about, and especially post kind of like our like Nixon-based study session, I'm just really stressed about all of this. But I really love that Abbey came to speak to CJ, and it does feel like not only she come to CJ from like CJ's professional perspective, but I think from a woman-to-woman perspective.
Yes, the sensitivity and the awareness of the situation that her and Jed have put CJ specifically in.
Also, a fun kind of note was the fact that in Gail's fishbowl, there is a tiny little interrogation chair and microphone, if you missed that.
So good.
So good. The fact that both of them are kind of on the verge of tears in this scene is so much. Never spilling over. Never a tear spilled though, and I love that. The information that whilst they were on the campaign trail, CJ saw Abbey giving Jed one of his shots, but never said anything, is also for me like strangely heartbreaking.
I think it goes to show how much she believes in Jed and how much she didn't want to have seen what she'd seen.
Yeah.
I also think the reveal, because she said, oh, I don't know whether I ask, is there anything I should know or is there anything else I need to know? And Oliver Babbish was kind of like, you mean to say you're not very precise with your language? And she knew all along she is precise with her language. God damn it.
I just think that this is such a powerhouse scene with two amazing female characters. I've got nothing but love and respect for it, and I hope for more CJ and Flotus in the future. I
would die to just see Stockard and Alison Janney just like doing some scene work together to prepare for that scene.
God, I'd love to see them in a play together, you know? Reporting back now, Josh is going to report back to Leo about his meeting with Joey. This is where we kind of come full circle with this big tobacco storyline and why Josh kind of looked so crestfallen when this guy was like, you know, they frauded the American public. Josh is like, look, if we're behind this big tobacco case, what we're saying is that the American public deserve their say. They deserve their day in court. They deserve to like be like, this person or this like this industry pulled the wool over our eyes. And now we're facing the consequences of it. And Josh is like, if we don't get behind that, who are we with what we're bringing up now with the president? And Leo's like, yeah, but we're not big tobacco. And I get where Leo's coming from, but part of me is like, you just can't get caught in any sort of double standard here.
Yeah, it's stressful for sure.
But we'll close out with the lads.
And I will just say, going into the scene, the man, I feel like a manning happening in this episode is so real. We do really have a kind of boys versus girls energy through this whole episode.
So many exquisite quotes from both sides as well. So Jed and Leo in the Oval. And Jed just like absolutely ending me with this line. My wife and I are fighting battles on several fronts at the moment, including with each other. Can you and I be men? Can we have a bond? What? Am I in some sort of film from the 1950s?
I feel like I'm down the British Legion on a Sunday afternoon. Like, what's going on?
I quite enjoy this kind of moment where Jed was very outraged and Leo is like, with respect, buddy, like, just talk to your wife. I don't think you're angry at me.
Jesus.
I actually think I've kind of given you more grace than I needed to. But we're at the point where we're gearing up to tell Sam. And so Toby calls Sam into his office. And Leo's there, and Leo's like, do you mind if we just go and talk to the president for a couple of minutes? Sam's all like, yeah, sure. Toby saying, I'll be here in the office when you're done. And that was exactly the same thing that CJ says he said to her as well. He is such a good boss. And when he's like that, I can't.
Yeah, Toby's like the high school teacher that you were like terrified of for the whole first term until Christmas. And then you just like find yourself crying for an extended period in his office over like an exam you failed or you're like really stressed about. And he just like lets it happen.
And just like stands up, shuffles some papers and is like, I'm going to go get a coffee, but you stay in here as long as you need. And you're like, okay, yeah, I will.
I love you.
Thanks, sir. I honestly, I probably never did that. I cried so much at school. It's so embarrassing. When people are like, I peaked at high school, I did not. Frankly, it was the worst. Couldn't have got worse. It hasn't seemed to have got much better, but definitely not good.
Now, this final scene we have to discuss. CJ and Josh.
I feel like the end of this episode was when I say a real downer, I mean like I felt horrible at the end of this episode.
Emotionally desolate at the end of this episode. I was emotionally bereft.
Talk me through it.
CJ is kind of like walking herself home. Alison Janney's hair is like flowing in the breeze. It's a spring day.
Yeah.
We've not seen her with her legs out in a long time. And I'm like, why is Alison Janney so beautiful?
Yeah.
The sky is kind of like pink. And then Josh comes to catch up with her to kind of like have a little bit of a check-in, but he's just like not quite emotionally intelligent enough to be able to pull it off. Because he's not Toby Ziegler. And then we have this moment where she refers to you guys rather than to us. And I'm like, oh my God, is CJ like getting out?
For me, I read that as her being like, I don't think I'm going to make it through this. I think that was her being like, we're going to strategize this and I'm going to fall.
I wondered also though whether, because we've seen several beats over the 2 seasons of CJ being on the outs as the one kind of like woman in high level staff position. I wonder if this is a moment of emotional distance for CJ of being like, I've been the guy's girl this whole time.
Yeah.
But ultimately, is this the boys' club closing ranks? And am I going to be the one that's sacrificed?
Because there has to be a fall guy. And unfortunately, like, she's the one that's in the public eye. And I think it makes sense that she's the one that's going to be like the lamb to slaughter. And when she walks away from I like that he's like, hey, do you want to like do this? Do you want to do that? And she's like, I just want to go home.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you go home, CJ, because I feel like you need a large glass of red and like maybe like a long shower.
Yeah. I feel like she's going to go home and she's going to call her dad and talk about completely incidental, like non-significant things and just be like single tearing.
Yeah. What an episode.
Honestly, I was so stressed the entire time and it did emotionally destroy me, but also one of my favorite episodes ever.
Mm-hmm.
Best fashion for you?
Yeah, straight into the quick fires. I mean, Abbey Bartlet getting out of a limo.
Wow.
Unmatched for me.
It was a fashion energy. I didn't even take in what she was wearing. Just the whole energy of it was giving fashion.
She was wearing like kind of a black skirt suit. And I will say that like often the makeup for Stockard Channing is they go for quite a lot of eyeliner on the lower lid. And it was even heavier than normal. And I was like, one, has she been crying? Two, is this actually an Elizabeth Taylor reference?
I feel like it must have been.
Either way, obsessed.
Obsessed. With an honourable mention for me. And I think they must have purposefully put both Abbey and CJ in black skirt suits. Because we don't often see either of them in black, actually.
No.
And I love that like mirroring they've done with the costuming. But CJ in her black skirt suit with the exposed knee in Babbish's office.
Yeah, gorge. What could a British or Irish politician never get away with?
Saying, can we be men?
Yeah, that's bang on, really. That's just not going to happen here. I mean, my punt was referring to themselves or being referred to as Batman and Robin.
Yeah, that would be memeified very quickly.
Yeah, awful.
In the UK, yeah.
Awful. How long until any of our big bingo items, guns, abortion, free speech, religion, etc. come up? I mean, for me, mine was like shout out big tobacco, the kind of like PACs again, and like big business funding, political campaigns, etc.
I would also say tax breaks for the wealthy.
Oh yeah, sure. No, that's a biggie. Almost too many to choose from this week for best writerly moment. I feel like mine had to go to CJ's. I mean, this is really going well, Oliver. It's almost hard to believe that 4 different women have sued you for divorce.
I would love to see and meet each of those 4 women.
Yeah.
I imagine it's a kind of smorgasbord, you know. I had to give it to the repeat of hearing CJ report that, you know, when they pulled me into the office, Toby said, I'll be right here in my office when you're done. And then we in the moment seeing Toby saying that to Sam.
Yeah. Devastating. Man, I feel like a man.
So why don't you knock off the cutie pie crap and answer the damn question?
I think mine had to go to my wife and I are fighting battles on several fronts at the moment, including with each other. Can you and I be men? Can we have a bond? With honorable mention, of course, to I hate Ellie's boyfriend. And then, girl, I feel like a girl.
CJ first naming the First Lady, because I don't think that we've seen any of the other members of staff being allowed to do that.
Not the men. Famously, she's like, she does to correct people when they're like, Mrs. Bartlett. She'll be like, Dr. Bartlett. Or when, and Jed's done it as well, when Toby was like, your wife. And he was like, let's just be friends and refer to her as either Mrs. Bartlett or the First Lady. So like to have an Abbey from CJ, I think is just huge, and just the sisterhood for me. Mine went to Abbey Bartlet actually for, the president is very glad you're here, particularly in this time of nonsense. And the moment, Leigh, that made you proudest to be an American.
The chin cup from Joey Lucas combined with the how is the president, because she's asking how is the president, and I know she does really mean that, but also included within that is the hidden meaning of, and how are you, Josh? Are you okay?
I'm okay. I'm okay. Yeah. Again, I think that's unmatched for me. I don't know how we can move on, but we simply must. And I suppose we're going to a study session about the Progressive Caucus, Leigh.
We're actually going into a study sesh on who even is Pramila Jayapal, but we will get there.
Cool. Take it away, Leigh Douglas.
So to answer one of your earlier questions, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez defines a caucus on her webpage by saying members can usually join a caucus without being appointed, and there is no limit to members. So that's what makes it different to a congressional committee. A committee you are assigned to, and there is a set number, and there's a set number of Democrats and a set number of Republicans. Whereas a caucus, you choose to join it when you are elected to Congress. And they kind of serve to build a set of voting coalitions. So it's basically like a group of lawmakers who are united by some kind of common cause into making legislation on a particular topic, and on other legislation voting together as a group and wielding their power of their votes as stronger as a group.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, for example, in 2019, the Congressional Progressive Caucus had enough members to withhold their votes from a bill that gave giveaways to Big Pharma. And so then House leadership was forced to alter their bill to protect employee-sponsored health plans from drug spikes.
Cool. So they're kind of there to be able to like lobby, but based on the power of their votes, right? So people are like, oh, we'll need to get such and such a caucus on side, otherwise we won't have the votes to get this thing through.
So for example, AOC, our fave, is a member of the pro-choice caucus, the Democratic Women's Caucus, those famous Democratic women, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and the LGBT Equality Caucus.
That's a lot of caucuses.
So many caucuses. Most people are like, it tends to be like intersectionally the identities that one individual might have, but also just like causes that they're passionate about.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Fun.
Karen Vaught of Mother Jones in 2019 described the House Progressive Caucus as a group of lawmakers whose advocacy of bold economic and social justice reforms over the past 28 years has often defined Congress's most leftmost flank. The CPC, as it's known on the Hill, hadn't achieved household name status itself, but its founder, Bernie Sanders, and its most famous new member that it had just gotten in 2019, Representative AOC, have. And over the course of the time from when the House Progressive Caucus was founded by Bernie Sanders, amongst others, in 1991, to now, it's moved from kind of the left-wing freak show over into quite mainstream Democratic policy. It's considered to be, they've not moved on the issues, but the Democratic Party has moved. So the Progressive Caucus now appears to be much more mainstream than it did back in 1991. And, you know, they care about things like debt-free college, universal child care, moving the US healthcare system away from like a for-profit system, all of that. And Bernie Sanders and his kind of, because Bernie Sanders used to be in the House before he was a senator, his most liberal House colleagues founded the group in 1991 to kind of fill the vacuum of liberal ideas that was being left by the presidencies of Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Because we're coming out of a very long period of conservative presidencies.
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi was also an early member of the Progressive Caucus.
Hey, Nancy.
Back when she was only in her fourth term. They finally made their C-SPAN debut in 1993 after a budget meeting with President Clinton. And Bernie Sanders is quoted in that C-SPAN interview in 1993 as saying, you know, we have the widest gap between the rich and the poor in the industrialized world. I don't think our job is to worry about the needs of the rich. Somebody's got to stand up for working people in this country.
Solid quote.
The media were kind of politely baffled. The White House reporters were skeptical and asked why the Progressive Caucus was necessary. They introduced the segment by calling them a group calling themselves the Congressional Progressive Caucus, who were looking out for, quote, working people and the poor.
You know, when like things like this are so crazy, because I'm like, it feels like what they stand for is the American dream, which is something that gets banged on about all the time. Like they're there being like, you know, this country should be affordable to live in for the majority of people who live here. Like, people should be able to...
The
90s, it's sink or swim, baby. It's like...
sink or swim, and it's also like, but the poor don't really exist because anyone can make anything of themselves.
Yeah, God.
You know? I will just say, I'm not saying that that's an argument that makes sense. I'm just saying that that was kind of the view at the time.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders responded by saying, "We're not going to tell you the Congress is a particularly progressive institution," he replied with a chuckle.
He's such a kind of like world-class shit stirrer, and I have nothing but respect for that. Mm-hmm. And I love a man who baffles people.
Yeah. Much like my own MP, Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
Cut from the same cloth.
Yeah, birds of a feather.
They actually kind of look the same also.
They are the same font of man.
Yeah.
Just in different parts of the world.
He went on to say, but we did think that there were more progressives in Congress than the White House or the American people really knew of. So we reached out and we brought together people to concentrate on a progressive agenda. Now, today, the Congressional Progressive Caucus is comprised of more than 100 members of the House and one senator, Bernie Sanders. And they are, quote, standing up for progressive ideals in Washington and throughout the country. They are advocates for prioritizing Americans over corporate interests, fighting social and economic inequality, and advancing civil liberties. They want comprehensive immigration reform, good paying jobs, fair trade, universal health care, climate action, to raise the minimum wage, eliminate political corruption, all of the good things that kind of you and I, and indeed most queer gals kind of believe in, fighting global warming, etc. Mm-hmm. Members of note who we've talked about before, Sarah McBride, the first trans congresswoman, is a member of the Progressive Caucus, as is famously AOC, and Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, who we'll talk about later. Representative Omar, who was also the first one of two first Muslim women elected to Congress, is currently the deputy chair of the Progressive Caucus. Mm-hmm. Within the Progressive Caucus, there are several task forces focusing on specific issues. AOC is chair of the Climate Crisis Task Force within the Progressive Caucus. There's one for policing, constitution and equality, one for energy and commerce, one for housing and banking. There are many that kind of work on specific issues. But let's now move to Pramila Jayapal and how she kind of fits in to this story.
Please do.
She was born in India and grew up between India, Indonesia, and Singapore. She came to the USA by herself at 16 to attend Georgetown University.
Same university as Zoe.
Also casually went to college at 16.
That's incredibly impressive.
Yeah. She said, I flew into New York and I flew by myself, which is really, I'm a mother and I have an 11-year-old. And I was just thinking, I'm not even 17 and I flew by myself from Indonesia to the States. And I remember landing in JFK and just being overwhelmed and just looking around and thinking, oh my God, because I'd only been to the States once and it was a very, very brief week-long visit or something. But I had never gone to look at the college I was going to. I didn't even know it was a Jesuit university. It accepted me and I was like, okay, I guess it's supposed to be good. It was in Washington, D.C. There was no one to meet me at the airport. And I think I got a connecting flight from New York to D.C. Or maybe I took a train and then my aunt and uncle picked me up in D.C. and took me to Georgetown. I had 2 suitcases. She went on to get her MBA from Northwestern and worked in a number of industries in the public and private sectors. Her activist career really took off after 9/11 when she made her immigrant rights organization Hate Free Zone, which is now known as One America. And she won several lawsuits on behalf of Somalis facing deportation from the United States. She's quoted as saying, I didn't know who Bernie was in 2001 when I took on the Bush administration, when I registered 23,000 immigrants to vote. But she went on to lobby Congress on immigration reform, and she lives in Seattle.
Shout out Seattle.
And I'm sure that many of my friends and loved ones would like to thank her for being one of the people who really spearheaded Seattle being one of the first places in the nation to get $15 an hour minimum wage, which I know I benefited from and a lot of my friends did. So thank you very much, Pramila, for that one. She published her first book in 2000, which was called Pilgrimage to India, A Woman Revisits Her Homeland. And her second book, which I'm definitely going to be ordering and reading, Use the Power You Have, A Brown Woman's Guide to Politics and Political Change. So she spent 20 years basically working internationally and domestically on global public health and development. And she was an award-winning national advocate for women's, immigrant, civil and human rights. She then became a state senator in Washington state. And then in 2016, she ran for Congress.
How exciting. Okay.
Her first run for Congress was endorsed. She was endorsed by Bernie Sanders.
That's already a really good start, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the 2016, obviously, Bernie himself was running for president.
Yeah.
And both of her opponents had endorsed Hillary Clinton. Stacey Hopkins, who's an Atlanta-based activist who was going to Seattle to visit during this election cycle and was a part of a political action committee set up by laid off Sanders campaign workers after he had dropped out of the race, said of Pramila Jayapal's race, everyone is watching. We're interested in seeing whether people are really ready to back a progressive candidate. So yes, Pramila Jayapal announced her candidacy for the 7th district seat in January. The 7th district seat in Seattle, by the way, incidentally, is my mother's district. So it's where my mum votes, which is amazing. She announced her candidacy in January and Sanders backed her in April. So he did it very quickly as well, which made her one of the first down ticket Democrats to get an endorsement from him.
Wow.
Her opponents downplayed it, saying that voters care more about local transportation and housing solutions than a mass movement. To which I would say, two things can be true.
Yes.
His endorsement really put like a national spotlight on her race. Bernie Sanders actually raised $180,000 for Jayapal's race in 5 days.
Whoa, that's a huge amount of money in a short time.
And his endorsement also doubled the number of contributors to her campaign. Neil Sroka, who was the communications director for Democracy for America, said, "At this time, I think Pramila is going to be one of the bright stars of the political revolution." One of the reasons that Jayapal got this endorsement from Bernie Sanders is because they'd connected personally when he'd previously traveled to Seattle. In August of that year, he was scheduled to speak at a Social Security rally in downtown Seattle, and Pramila Jayapal was speaking just before him. She later said, "I came off stage and he said, 'You said everything I was going to say.'" And then later that day, she was introducing Bernie Sanders for a rally for his campaign at the University of Washington. And she requested a private conversation with him. And she later said, "I loved what Bernie was saying about class issues, our tax system, affording college. The thing I wanted to talk to him about was racial justice." And she said, "I was really impressed with his thoughtfulness."
Oh, yeah, okay.
So Pramila Jayapal was elected in 2016 to Congress and is now serving her 5th term in Congress for Washington's 7th district. And her district includes most of downtown Seattle, Shoreline, Vashon Island, Lake Forest Park, parts of Bern and Normandy Park, which just hearing those place names is so nice.
Leigh loves Seattle.
I love Seattle. She was the first South Asian woman elected to the US House of Representatives.
Always exciting to be a first, always comes with the feeling of wish it wasn't in 2016.
Yes. And she also was one of only 24 naturalized citizens currently serving in the United States Congress.
Yeah,
because she obviously wasn't born in the United States.
Yeah. So you can run for Congress and you can run for the Senate if you're naturalized, but you can't run for president.
Correct. Basically, she really quickly flew through the ranks within the House of Representatives to become a really important progressive leader. She's a member of the House Judiciary Committee, ranking member of the Subcommittee on Immigration Integrity, Security and Enforcement. In summary, she's got a lot of really important jobs within the House, and she's on a lot of really important committees. She's been a leader on immigration since she was in the House and has championed legislation to bring the $15 minimum wage to be national. So then in 2018, she's getting into her second term in Congress. This is, remember we had the blue wave, that midterms. It was like the first midterm cycle of the first Trump presidency. And that was the election cycle where the squad was elected. So AOC was elected that year. Ayanna Pressley, who was quoted as saying, "The people closest to pain should be the closest to power."
What a quote.
What a quote. Obviously, Representative Omar, who's the first Somali American member of Congress, and together with Rashida Tlaib, who was also elected in 2018, who is the first Palestinian American woman elected to Congress. They are together the first two Muslim women elected to Congress. So the squad is elected and they join the House Progressive Caucus, which Pramila Jayapal has just become co-chair of that same year in 2018.
Right. Okay, so like genuinely is squad assemble.
Yeah, it's a big moment. And that year was a huge moment for progressive politics in Washington because obviously, as I mentioned, the midterms gave the Democrats the majority in the House, and 20 new freshman members of Congress decided to join the House Progressive Caucus. And also lots of like long-term incumbents who'd kind of flirted with the Progressive Caucus before decided to officially join as members. So kind of out of nowhere, suddenly the Progressive Caucus had 95 members.
It's getting a huge amount of traction.
Yeah. And so when you join the Progressive Caucus, there's a kind of like induction that happens, obviously on this occasion being led by Pramila Jayapal and her co-chair at the time, Representative Pocan. And so they kind of like laid out their strategies for what that kind of second 2 years of the Trump term were going to be, including a Medicare for All bill, a sweeping anti-corruption bill, part of which the goal was to get Trump to release his tax returns, was a big thing on the progressive agenda at the time. That night, they also hosted a happy hour with the media, which 80 reporters RSVP'd to. So suddenly there was a lot of media interest. The media is taking the Progressive Caucus a lot more seriously than they ever have before. Now, obviously, Republicans condemn the Progressive Caucus as kind of out-of-touch socialists.
Really? In the words of Oliver Babbish, I'm shocked.
Moderate Democrats also say like that the CPC gives Republicans too much ammunition.
Right, okay.
Now, obviously, like with that many representatives in one group, it's a broad church, like they're not all totally aligned on everything. In this instance, some of them thought that they needed to be more aggressive bargaining with Nancy Pelosi, who at the time was House Speaker, whereas others felt like they really needed to fall in line behind mainstream Democratic leadership in order to like defeat Trump and his policy agenda.
Yeah.
Again, kind of contemporaneously at the time, Vaught, writing for Mother Jones, said, "From my vantage point, the group is using the churn of the 116th Congress to lay the groundwork for a progressive future, the success of which will be measured not by purity tests or towing the line, but by building a coalition whose vision for America has steadily found its way to become the centerpiece of a new Democratic majority."
That's so exciting. It's the thing that's really exciting is like they didn't have to take it apart and rename it and like rebrand it. Because that happens all too often is like there's been an origin story of something, but then it has had to be made more palatable in order for it to become powerful. And the thing that's really amazing is the history of this particular caucus has just been like, keep at it.
Yeah.
Keep, strengthening the ranks. And they have like pulled people towards their like gravitational field through just like sheer brute force.
Yeah. And a huge part of Pramila Jayapal's legacy from her time as co-chair and then going on to be chair is that one of the first things that she did, so Pelosi at this point really wants to be reelected to be House Speaker. Obviously, they had just come out of being in the minority in Congress. They were back in the majority. Nancy Pelosi wants to be the Speaker. And Jayapal and her co-chair really kind of seized the moment and met with several organizations like Indivisible and Move On, which had helped get people like AOC and Ayanna Pressley elected. And they met with those groups to ask them basically to hold off endorsing Nancy Pelosi as Speaker until she had agreed to give members of the Progressive Caucus a proportional amount of important leadership assignments in various committees to represent the size and the proportion of the House that they now represented.
Oh, okay.
So Pramila Jayapal meets with Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi agrees to give the Progressive Caucus proportional representation of lawmakers on the kind of A committees, what lawmakers refer to as A committees, which is Appropriations, Ways and Means, Energy and Commerce, Intelligence Committee. And after that meeting on November 15th, Pramila Jayapal then got in touch with all of these really influential groups and told them to go forward and endorse Nancy Pelosi.
Once she got the deal struck.
Yes. And then she herself endorsed Nancy Pelosi, saying no one can doubt Pelosi's progressive chops. She later said, it wasn't that we doubted Pelosi's credentials as a progressive, but we felt that we really needed to have some assurance around her commitment to making sure that the blue wave, which in our mind had been fueled by progressives across the country, continues in Congress.
Yeah. What an amazing piece of political gameplay.
Yeah. I also think one of the things that I personally really value about Pramila Jayapal as she continues to serve as the member of Congress for the kind of Seattle downtown area is I really value her authenticity as a leader. Also during this time in 2019, Jayapal said in a hearing on the Equality Act, now this isn't the ERA, it was an amendment to the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964 to add protections on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, she speaks about her child here, who at the time had come out as gender nonconforming. She has since come out as a trans woman, but she's speaking from this time when she identified as gender nonconforming. And Pramila Jayapal said, and it occurred to me that we're talking about fear versus love. We're talking about fear versus freedom. And I didn't intend to say this today, but, and then she kind of has a moment and excuses herself. And then she says, my beautiful, now 22-year-old child told me last year that they were gender non-conforming, and over the last year, I have come to understand from a deeply personal mother's perspective. I've always been a civil rights activist. I've always fought for my constituents and my communities to have equal rights. But from a mother's perspective, I came to understand their newfound freedom. That is the only way I can describe what has happened to my beautiful child, what their newfound freedom to wear a dress, to rid themselves of some conformist stereotypes of who they are, to be able to express who they are at their real core. And since this deeply impactful moment last year, my child, who has always done well in school but has carried what a mother can only describe as a heavy burden of conflict in their own being, that I could not fully identify or help to express. Since this deeply impactful moment last year, my child's embracing of their non-conforming gender identity and all that it has allowed, all that it allows in terms of their creativity, their brilliance, their self-expression, the only thought I wake up with every day is, my child is free. My child is free to be who they are, and in that freedom comes a responsibility for us as legislators to protect that freedom to be who they are and to legislate, as Dr. Wiley so beautifully said, to legislate our behaviour towards all people in our society.
It's very well put.
4 years later, her House colleagues introduced legislation to ban transgender women and girls from sports. And describing herself as a proud mom of a trans kid, she talked about how painful it was when this legislation was brought forward, saying, I know that when my daughter came out, it was not an easy process. What she continues to see around her and from politicians, unfortunately, is a condemning of who she is. We cannot allow this to happen. She reflected on it by saying, it's really hard. It's hard on our family. It's hard on my daughter to see this. I think she has the comfort of a community around her that supports her, including her very fierce mother.
Yeah.
And so she's been a really outspoken advocate for trans rights and for the LGBTQ plus community in general throughout her time in Congress. She's also introduced a Bill of Trans Rights, which is a super ambitious legal framework for federal protections for trans and non-binary people, which is unlikely to kind of advance in Congress, but it is a roadmap for what's needed. And she said, every time I talk about it, it becomes a focal point for hope and for a sense of justice to continue to prevail, that we know what we're striving for, even if we're having to fight all the opposition and cruelty right now.
Yeah.
Also, in 2021, she was one of 3 congresswomen, including Barbara Lee, who we brought up earlier, and Cori Bush, who spoke openly about their abortions for the first time by testifying at a House hearing on reproductive rights. And as she pointed out to BuzzFeed News, their stories added the personal experience of women of color to a debate that is largely dominated by white men.
Yeah, which is so true. And I think the thing that feels striking with a lot of the work that she's doing, especially now we're at the start of a new Trump administration, is keeping space for those voices and keeping on saying those things out loud. Because, it might be a tough 4 years in being a legislator, trying to get things actually brought into law, I think is going to be incredibly difficult from what I can understand right now. But if we keep having these amazing advocates for queer rights or for the rights of anyone really that isn't a straight white rich man, I don't know, keeping the conversation alive, because my biggest fear is just that there is no space to use your voice, and anyone who's in any sort of minority or oppressed community just becomes quiet for 4 years.
Yeah. I would really encourage people she wrote an op-ed for the New York Times, basically describing the circumstances of her own abortion and why she made that choice to have it. And it's a really powerful piece of writing. And, she speaks very powerfully about, she had quite a traumatic birth with her daughter, and her daughter's kind of continued health struggles as a result of that, and also her own struggles with postpartum depression. It's really powerful as to, her reasons for why she made that choice and why she feels it's important that women continue to have that choice. She recently stepped down as chair of the Progressive Caucus to make way for a new generation, because she, unlike some other people, believes in the power of bringing new people up into leadership positions. She's still serving in the House and still a member of the Progressive Caucus. She's just no longer the chair. And her replacement as the Progressive chair, Congressman Khazar, said, if the Democratic Party was a little bit more like Chairwoman Jayapal and a little bit less like Joe Manchin, I think we would have won this election.
I don't think they're wrong.
Yeah. And, I think she's a huge part of why the House Progressive Caucus is as powerful as it is today. And they will continue to be incredibly powerful in blocking various parts of Trump's agenda through this term. And I think she's really set us up to have a really powerful group in our corner through the next 4 years.
To have the numbers be as large as they are, that's the clout that we need to block some dangerous stuff from passing into law. Yeah.
And, it's coming at a time when things like the Blue Dog Democratic Caucus, which is a more kind of moderate Democratic caucus, has really dwindled in its power and has gone from having kind of 54 members during the Obama years down to, at one point in 2023, they had 7 because, they've been criticized for not kind of moving with the times because they're viewed as being kind of the more fiscally responsible Democrats. But along with that comes, what they might refer to as kind of common sense solutions, but there is also a sense that the members of that more centrist Democratic caucus, were some of the last people to get on board with marriage equality and the right to choose and all of these things. And it's kind of coming out of more of a Dixiecrat Southern Democrat tradition.
Yeah.
And also when they did dwindle down to the 7 members, they were all men. So yeah, I continue to be incredibly proud to have my family represented in Congress by Pramila Jayapal.
Amazing. What a fun study sesh yet again, Leigh. I feel like I really enjoy when we do deep dives into particular individuals, because I think we often see in the UK news specifically just kind of your main characters from American politics. Unless you're looking for it, unless you're getting certain newspapers or watching particular news broadcasting in the UK, you're not hearing about individuals that are anything other really than just kind of like the president or like the odd congressperson or senator who's like in the news at that particular time.
Yeah, totally. And I think, oftentimes, I think especially just on the issue of her kind of like trans rights advocacy, obviously that's like the forefront of so many of our minds right now because of what Trump has just signed. She speaks, not that it is the responsibility of the parent of a trans kid to immediately be able to speak eloquently to that as a topic. And, clumsiness is absolutely allowed while people are adjusting. But she speaks so elegantly about her experience of having a trans kid. And I think she is such a powerful ally to the LGBTQ plus community.
Well, that was a really nice way to kind of round off quite a stressful episode of television.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really needed that. I needed some hopefulness. So thank you, Leigh.
Yes, we've got some very powerful women in our corner.
I feel exhausted by the stress of the West Wing currently, but we should meet up next week and do the next episode.
We have 2 more episodes left of season 2. I can't believe it.
Yeah, it's insane. So should I see you here same time next week?
Sounds good.
If any of you fine folks out there wish to get in touch, please do. We love to hear from you.
queergalswatch@gmail.com. I have received some lovely emails from people recently that have really brightened my day each time. And all of them get shared with Fi, of course. And also, we're Queer Gals Watch, wherever you get your socials. We obviously would love for you to take a look at our Patreon. It's a really fun little community over there. But if that's something that's not kind of financially possible for you, it would also be amazing if you could rate and review, share with a friend, share on social media, so that more people can find us and we can keep making this podcast and do season 3, because we really want to do that.
We really want to do season 3, and just spread the good word if you so feel that way, and we'll be eternally grateful.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, folks, and Leigh, I'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.